Now, remarks from former Georgia Representative Cynthia McKinney. She's running for president this year as a member of the Green Party. From the University of Maryland, this is an hour.
Cynthia McKinney is a six-term former member of Congress of Georgia, and she bridges the intergenerational connect between hip-hop and authentic leadership. She has consistently spoken out against political corruption and mismanaged democratic processes. Cynthia McKinney has advocated for the declassification of MLK's assassination files. She is a strong Black woman and single mother who calls for leadership that her son can look up to. She spoke out against the Iraq War and the attack of people in New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina. She has been consistently targeted for her work against COINTELPRO and the assassination of iconic hip-hop figures and the ongoing war against current hip-hop figures. She fights domestic terrorism, also known as racial profiling and police brutality. And she is the voice of the people. She refuses to conform to mainstream leadership. Rocking cultural garb and natural hair, her presence represents an image that young people of culture can look up to and emulate and embody. So without further ado, I introduce you all to Cynthia McKinney.
That was wonderful. Well, thank you very much. I'd like to thank the Niamburo Center for allowing us to come here today. Thank all of you for being here with us this afternoon. And I just have a few little things to say, and then we'll open it up for questions from all of you. I do want to also say thank you to Dr. Jared Ball, who is, where did he go? There he is. And I'm sure we're going to hear from you in a few minutes. Yes, we are. We're not going to let you grace this room without addressing all of us. He's a professor of journalism, a prominent member of the Green Party, my predecessor in the Green Party, former candidate for president of the Green Party, and has endorsed now our run for president. Okay, great. I just want to talk about a little bit about what motivates me and what motivated me during my 12 years in the United States Congress to tell the truth and to seek justice. Actually, let me tell you that we're in the 21st century, and this is the front page of a newspaper, Jackson, Mississippi, and it's not the 18th or 19th century. It's not even the 20th century. It's the 21st century. A modern-day lynching. And this body was found hanging from a tree by young people who were on their way to school. I was invited to Jackson, Mississippi to speak, and this was the front page of the newspaper that greeted me as I went to Jackson, Mississippi. We also know that we have a problem in this country, and that is that we are experiencing income inequality like we have almost never experienced in this country before. Poverty in the United States is a problem. It is a problem for us today. In fact, U.S. mayors just recently issued a report saying that hunger and homelessness are intensifying in our cities across our country. Nobody's talking very much about eliminating poverty, But I can tell you, if we can spend $720 million a day on war, then certainly we can put a huge dent in the poverty that is experienced in this country. And we also have to acknowledge that there are disparities, and that's what I want to talk to you about, because of the wonderful work of United for a Fair Economy. They are responsible for the figures here that measure racial disparities in our country that exist today. For example, in overall poverty, with no intervention in public policy, that is, if our elected officials choose to do nothing and let the current course just take care of itself, it will take 150 years to eliminate the poverty, the racial poverty gap in our country. That is absolutely intolerable. Child poverty. If there is no intervention by public policy makers, it will take 210 years to eliminate the child poverty gap in this country by race. Imprisonment. All of us know what the situation is with criminal injustice in our country today. Police brutality, police terror, police murder. In Atlanta, Georgia, a 92-year-old woman sitting in her home is attacked by rogue police officers and murdered. And her family is still not been made whole. Little justice. But for the issue of imprisonment, without public policy intervention, that is, if our elected officials do nothing, it will take 190 years for the racial disparity in imprisonment to be eliminated. Income, per capita income. It will take 581 years to eliminate the per capita income racial disparity in our country. Now, not only are these numbers, these are people. These are our brothers and sisters who are certainly less fortunate than we are. I recently traveled to Texas. I left Dallas, the gleaming, beautiful city of Dallas, and I drove down the expressway to the city of Houston. I was greeted as I entered the gateway of Houston. Homeless man under the bridge, man who was begging at the street corner, the next street corner around the corner, a man with a squeegee trying to eke out a living by washing the windshields on people's cars. This is a side of America that no one is talking about. And in fact, in city after city after city after city, poverty is being criminalized. Per capita income, 581 years to close the per capita income gap if there is no public policy intervention, meaning if our elected officials do nothing. And in housing. Now, these figures are before the subprime mortgage crisis, which is occurring today as a result of predatory lending, affecting disproportionately Black and Latino families who are being purged from their homes. Some have called it Hurricane America. It will take before the crisis, it would take 1,664 years for a black family to aspire to and reach the same level of home ownership as a white family in this country. The latest figures from United for a Fair Economy inform us that now, as a result of predatory lending, we have had the largest transfer of wealth in the history of our country from blacks and Latinos. $92 billion of wealth transferred from the black community. $98 billion transferred from the Latino community because of predatory lending. And so instead of it being 1,664 years to the racial disparity in home ownership being eliminated, now it's over 5,000 years. But very few people are talking about that. This, of course, is a face of a man who is in excruciating pain. You'll find out why in just a moment. This man has had his arm severed by a railroad train coming down the track. This man's arm was left on the tracks. The emergency worker, caught in so much emotion, he can't contain his tears. What did this man do? He's from Mexico. And he needed to come to the United States to support his family. Supporting your family shouldn't be a life sentence. This man eventually died. These are photographs from Abu Ghraib. This is what happens when violence becomes ingrained in the culture. When violence is sanctioned at the highest levels of our government. When violence is carried out by the highest levels of our government. Even innocent individuals become a part of the violence. This is also a violation of United States law. This is a violation of international law. This is torture. These are the photographs from Abu Ghraib. And when I took this photograph to the floor of the House of Representatives, the House parliamentarian came to me and said, well, you know, we have to maintain decorum on the floor of the House. The Bush tax cuts. When people talked about what went through, what the world saw with Hurricane Katrina, what they saw was that there is a color line and there is a poverty line. And our country is yet to deal with the color line. It is yet to deal with the poverty line. But the Bush tax cuts certainly take care of some folks, because in the city of New Orleans, 78% of the Bush tax cuts are going to people whose incomes are over $200,000. And the first act of the Democratic majority in the Congress could have been to repeal the Bush tax cuts. Hasn't happened yet. Of course, we probably are familiar with this photograph. One is Associated Press, the U.S. press. The other, Agence France Presse, the international press. But we see the dehumanization, the criminalization in the words and the language of the press. So when we look at the news every evening, when we listen to the news on the radio, we have to be aware of the conditioning and the loaded words that are being used to shape our thoughts. But of course, the dark-skinned person is looting, and the non-dark-skinned persons are finding. And there's a cartoonist who just loves to have fun with me. And basically, everyone, as you can see, is applauding the emperor's new clothes. Except the truth of the matter is that the emperor ain't got no clothes on at all. And there I am, raining on the parade, just reminding folks, well, now I wouldn't use words like that because, you know, I'm from the South and I'm nice and genteel, but the emperor didn't have any clothes on. Just had to remind people. For 12 years, that's what I did for you in the United States Congress. And when I went to Miami to look at the conditions there and understanding the severe gentrification that is going on in Miami, but all across America, they too call it Hurricane America, called gentrification Hurricane America. They were passing out these cards asking folks to take back the vote. And so that's what I would also ask you to do, even though the Florida and the Michigan delegates are under some controversy now within the Democratic Party. But we have to take back the vote. And we have to understand that politics, we're on a student campus here, so let me switch into my ad hoc professor role, and after I finish my dissertation, maybe I'll actually become a full-time professor. That, as you know, politics is the authoritative allocation of values in a society. Those statistics are there because your elected officials have implemented policies that allow them to be there, to allow these conditions to take place. And when you decide that you are going to take back your vote and give your vote to people whose platform contains issues that are important to you, then that's when we'll have the beginning of real revolution in our country. I've been all over this country. I've been to college campuses, and I can tell you it is totally unnecessary that students would graduate $100,000 in debt. It is totally unnecessary that those who choose to go on to graduate level schools, education, would be over $150,000 in debt. It is not necessary. But when you spend $720 million a day in war. I thank the American Friends Service Committee for informing us of the things that we could have for $720 million a day, from new elementary schools to families put in homes to elementary school teachers to full 4-year scholarships at university, 35,000 of them. Head Start slots children with health care, free school lunches, and over 1.2 million homes equipped with renewable energy. I recently have joined with the Hurricanes Katrina and Rita survivors. And from the various places that they have been displaced to around the country, they have decided to come together and put a platform of action, of political action together, so that their voices won't be forgotten in this important election season. They have come up with a 10-point plan. It is called the Reconstruction Plan. And the 10-point plan includes freedom. They want freedom now, and they say that freedom consists of election integrity. How is it that we can hold elections and not be sure that the results we are told actually reflect the will of the voters? They want voter choice. They want civil liberties, and they want their survivor rights as enshrined in the proceedings of the International Tribunal on Hurricanes Katrina and Rita. Interestingly, the Green Party platform also supports election integrity, voter choice, civil liberties, and Katrina survivor rights. They want full employment now. So that includes also a right to organize, repeal of free trade agreements, greening the economy, and jobs at a livable wage. If workers' jobs had increased in their pay rate equivalent to the increase of CEO pay in this country, the minimum wage would be $22 an hour, according to the Institute for Policy Studies. The Reconstruction Platform also calls for reparations now. And I'm very proud to say that the Green Party platform also endorses reparations. They want a budget for human needs instead of for corporate greed. That includes a single-payer form of health care system in our country. They want an end to police brutality. I've participated in demonstrations across our country about police brutality and the various situations that we have going on literally right now in our country, where people who have tried to protect people who were literally being beaten by police while they were in custody, now those people, those defenders of people's rights, are also being litigated against by the authorities. They also call for an end to the drug war. And they say that the drug war is an attack on truth, it's an attack on justice, and it's also an attack on people whose problem is addiction. They call for an end to prisons for profit. They call for release of political prisoners like Mumia Abu-Jamal, Leonard Peltier. It makes no sense that our country is the incarceration capital of the world. They call for protection of the environment and recognition that we have got to green our lifestyle in this country. It is estimated by some that if we just reduced our waste alone of energy, that we could cut our energy consumption by 30%. We need to do more than reduce waste. We need to change the way we live in this country, and war is not an acceptable energy policy. We should end militarism. We should not have our soldiers stationed all over the world. We have much more to offer the world than our military might. But sadly, 90% of our security budget gives to the world a view of our military force. We should institute a Department of Peace as introduced by Dennis Kucinich. We should end the militarization of space, and we should dismantle AFRICOM. The last thing we need to send to Africa is a military command. And then finally, we need to stand for peace. We need peace now. And we start with making peace with our indigenous brothers and sisters. The United States was one of the few countries of the world to not support the declaration, the United Nations Declaration on Indigenous Rights. We need to support indigenous rights at the UN and here at home. Those are the 10 points of the Reconstruction platform. And in closing, I would just say this. We do have an opportunity, by thinking outside of the box, to make a real difference and provide voters with choice. The Green Party is a viable choice. And to the extent that the Green Party expresses and supports your views and ideas, I would hope that you would give us a look, and then on Election Day, give us a vote. Thank you. Yes, sir. I see we already have a few questions. Yes, sir.
Congresswoman McKinney, thanks, first of all, for coming here to my home state of Maryland, giving us a little of your inspiration. You've really moved me, for one, and I thank you for that. I'm wondering, can you give us a general idea of how your campaign is going so far, and what are your future plans for your campaign? For instance, are you going to be campaigning and trying to campaign in all 50 states? I know I just overheard the Green Party's National Press Secretary say that the Green Party has 21 ballots. That leaves a number of ballots that the Green Party is not going to be able to provide you. I'm wondering, do you have a plan for getting on, say, 40, 50 ballot lines? Just wondering if you could give us a sense of where you're going, what your plan is.
Thank you very much for the question. We've already visited 23 states, and we've done that on very little finance, and so we could always use a little more help there, but our intention is to visit all of the states. All 50 of the states, plus D.C. statehood, we support as well. We are in a campaign, of course, that is contested, and therefore there are other candidates for the Green Party nomination. And we have to go and take our message to the Green Party members who will actually be casting their votes at state conventions or in primaries. We've already had a number of primaries, and we've got a delegate count, although I don't exactly know how many delegates we have, because that is still in the process of being tabulated. But we won Illinois, we won D.C., and maybe Brent can help on. We won Arkansas, we won Maine, I think. We don't know about Massachusetts. So we've got, we're in the business of collecting delegates. Just like the other two major parties they have their candidates trying to collect delegates, so too it is with the Green Party. And since I'm new to the Green Party, then I have an additional challenge. But I've never found it difficult to meet new friends. Yes.
I have a couple of questions.
Well, I better get a pen, because I don't want to be like Rumsfeld in American Blackout, which I'm supposed to remind folks that we're showing American Blackout at Howard University. So if you want to see a wonderful, wonderful film, come and see it.
How do you plan on like funding like the Department of Peace and your plan for like healthcare, education, do like raising taxes, and also what do you say to people who? What do you see like the Green Party, let's say within the next decade, and what do you think about people like Barack Obama who are essentially like taking like a lot of progressive voters that will generally vote for Green Party? So that's all I have.
Okay. First of all, I think we already have the infrastructure necessary for a Department of Peace. It's called the Department of State. And so we can rename the Department of State so that it's very clear what the mission is. In terms of funding health care, as I said before, we're spending $720 million a day on war, and just imagine if we weren't spending that on war, if we weren't increasing our debt. I think it's about $10 trillion now. There's a lot that we could do, and I listed off some of those things that we do with the money that we're spending on war now. And with respect to Barack Obama, I think members of the Green Party represent voter choice, and they are happy when voters have choice.
Representative McKinney, Ms.
Yes,
McKinney.
Cynthia.
Cynthia, wow.
And some people say Sister Cynthia. That's
First,
right.
I mean, in this post-9/11 world, it is so difficult to speak truth, and I hope people can give you another round of applause for just having the courage to come and speak your mind, as you've been doing. I mean, I just think it's not an easy task to have courage in this country. Two questions, though, for you, if I could. The first is, you and your family have spent years in the Democratic Party. I wanted to know what was your breaking point, effectively, that made it so you were like, you know what, this party is just not my home. Because I can't imagine that was an easy decision, given your roots in the party. And the second question I had for you is, if you could just help us, I'm sure I'm not alone here, where I have a lot of friends and family have their alternating Obama and Clinton buttons and bumper stickers. If you could help us articulate to our friends and family why McKinney is a better choice than the so-called candidates of change.
Okay, first of all, with the breaking point. It was my birthday, March 17th of, which is St. Patrick's Day, that in front of the Pentagon, I declared my independence. I watched as the Democratic majority in Congress decided to vote to support funding for the war. And of course, I had participated in every anti-war demonstration that I possibly could, those in Washington, Chicago, New York, California. And this anti-war position, stopping an atrocity, became very important to me. When the Democratic majority could have voted to stop the war funding, they didn't. When the Democratic majority could have voted to institute a livable wage, they didn't. When the Democratic majority could have voted to roll back the Patriot Act, the Secret Evidence Act, the Military Tribunals Act, they didn't. And the Bush tax cuts, they didn't. I had enough of didn't and wanted to go where I could find people who would and who were committed to doing something. That's what I did. And why should people consider voting for me? Well, I think I've had a history of telling inconvenient truths. I was taken to a church service when I was visiting Dallas, Texas. And the pastor there talked about being an inconvenient hero. And he urged the members of the congregation to be an inconvenient hero. An inconvenient hero was the one who always just happened to say the right thing, which was the wrong thing, at any given time. The convenient hero was the one who was silent, who said nothing and did nothing, and won the adulation of the crowds for doing nothing and for saying nothing. But of course, my first campaign theme in 1992, when I first ran for Congress, was warriors don't wear medals, they wear scars. And you've seen my scars for no other reason than that I was determined to tell the truth, to call it as I saw it, and to lay it out there for people to make their own minds. So, people have a choice. Voters are supreme in a republic. They ought to be. And voters ought to have choice. I'll conclude with this story. One gentleman went into the grocery store and he saw 8 different brands of Oreo cookie. And he came back out and said, "Why am I supposed to restrict my political choices to just 2? Voter choice. That's what we are about. That's what the Green Party is about. And that, I think, is what democracy is about."
Hello. I also want to thank you for coming to this area. It's great to see you. I'm a longtime activist in the Green Party, and I have a question. There's been some discussion on Green Party email lists about a group. This is really an honest question because I don't know much about it. Called the Reconstruction Party.
Yes.
And I've heard that you're also, at the same time that you're working with the Green Party, you're working with the Reconstruction Party, which I think is based in the African American community.
Yes.
in New Orleans especially.
Yes, yes.
And I'm just wondering how that works. And you were talking about the Reconstruction platform.
Yes.
And so is that a party, or are you working with 2 formations at once? I wonder if you could say about that.
The Reconstruction platform is the political expression of people who are Hurricane Katrina and Rita survivors, and of people who support their aspirations, their political aspirations. So the Reconstruction Party does not yet exist, but the aspirations for the party and for its membership as reflected in the platform is in the process of being formulated. What does that have to do with the Green Party? Well, it has everything to do with the Green Party because I'm a part of the Green Party now. And so what we are finding is that the 2-party system has failed to support the needs of the internally displaced people who are survivors of Hurricanes Katrina and Rita. They, in an act of self-empowerment, have decided that they want a political expression. And I would be very hopeful that all members of the Green Party would support the political expression of those people now who find themselves outside of the 2-party paradigm.
Cynthia?
Yes, thank
Cynthia.
you.
It's been awesome.
I
to see you
like
talk.
Sister Cynthia.
Yeah, awesome. I'd like to thank also Head Rock.
Yes.
That was amazing. It was awesome to see so much diversity in the Green Party. I had no idea existed. It's the first time I've ever been to one of these events like this. So, I know you talked a lot about racial issues as far as monetary, how separation is obvious in the United States, but beyond that, how do we get across the message that we're all brothers and sisters of this universe and we all have the right to live here and be equal? How else, beyond monetary, how else do we convey that message?
Well, first of all, we have to live that, and we have to breathe that. But secondly, I believe that the embodiment of the 10-point platform, as espoused by the Reconstruction movement, can help to create a movement in this country like that actually got me involved in politics. That's what we don't have now. We need a movement in this country. We know one thing for sure. When we read the counterintelligence program papers, the one thing that we know more than anything else is that the powers that be are afraid of a room that looks like this. They are afraid of black people and white people and people of all religions and backgrounds coming together to move our country forward. They are afraid of that. So you know what? We need to make them afraid.
Some gentleman told me this a long time ago. He said, black, white, Latino, all of our bones are the same color, so live it like that.
That's right. That's right. That's right. And I sense it out there. I sense it, that people really want to come together and move our country forward. Let's just remember that on April 4th, 1968, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s life was cut short. But it was cut short in the middle of a movement that was really going to threaten the entrenched economic interests of our country. The Poor People's Campaign. Just remember, that was the unfinished business of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., where he was going to present to the United States Congress that check, that bounced check that he talked about for economic parity, the elimination of those disparities in our country. That is something that we all can gather around to support. And if we do that, I believe we can take our country a mighty long way. The decisions that are being made now that create these disparities for income, for housing, for imprisonment, for family wealth, all of those disparities that were mentioned earlier are decisions that are made by people in the Congress, on the school board, the city council, people who are elected by us. Public policy intervention can change those numbers, and it can change the conditions. And how do I know that? And how can I state that with such conviction? Because that's been my life. My father ran for office 2 times before the passage of the Voting Rights Act. There was no opportunity in Georgia before the Voting Rights Act. But when Lyndon Baines Johnson, my father was down there on the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma as well, not on the 2nd march, but the 1st march, when the heads got cracked open. And the nation saw that as merely an attempt by black people in the South to be able to cast a vote. And so, with a stroke of a pen, that same pen that the district attorney in Gina talked about, he said, with the stroke of a pen, I can ruin your lives. So with the stroke of a pen, the Voting Rights Act was signed. And then that mandated that laws were changed in the state of Georgia that made it possible for my father to get elected, whereas before he had run 2 times and he was not elected. And he served in the Georgia legislature for 30 years, till the same people who kicked me out kicked him out too, in crossover voting. And that's another thing I have to wonder, the extent to which there's crossover voting that's happening today on a nationwide level. Yes, sir.
Congressman McKinney, I have a request. Obama does some great speeches, but I wonder if you on your website could indicate where he has not voted correctly in a lot of the issues you've talked about earlier, just because I don't think people are seeing him for what he really does, but more for what he speaks for.
Well, you know, at this point, you're absolutely right that contrasting of candidates is part and parcel of running a campaign. We'll leave that to them. What we want to do is to promote what we stand for and let people even know that an alternative does exist.
I still think it'd be good for you to show his inconsistencies where he didn't vote the correct way.
I think people who are searching for alternatives already know that.
Good afternoon, Sister Cynthia,
Yes.
which I'm glad to have the opportunity to refer to a politician in those terms. It's a
Thank you,
welcome
great.
change.
But I don't consider myself a politician.
Well, a politician and a fellow movement activist, I could say both of
Fantastic.
those
Thank
two things.
you.
It's great to have
Thank
somebody who
you.
is both of those two things. And I guess I wanted to sort of make some comments that could lead to a question. You were talking about Martin Luther King Jr. and his struggle and how we need a movement. And it just sort of brought to mind something that Hillary Clinton said, and where, you know, that it wasn't great speeches that brought about change, but it was actually a president signing it into law. And she said that his dream was only made a reality when it took a president to get it done, which I feel like there's a couple problems with that. One of which, it acts as if Dr. King's dream has been realized, as if there isn't racism and inequality on extremely high levels. And the other problem with it is that it, you know, from my view, social change happens when there are mass movements to pressure, you know, these politicians who, unlike yourself, aren't fellow movement activists, right? Change happens when there's pressure and there's fear in the hearts of those in power to grant those reforms, not when, you know, benevolent old, you know, white men like Lyndon Johnson hand it down to the people. And I guess, you know, it's been really inspiring to hear you talk about the plight of undocumented workers from other countries and connect these struggles. And I know I applaud you for taking your fight to the electoral arena, but also how are we gonna build the struggle that you've referred to the need for outside of the electoral arena? How are we going to connect the struggles of the undocumented workers to the people who displaced by Hurricane Katrina, to people who want to see an end to this war? So, yeah, if you could please speak to that.
Thank you for asking that question, and that's why in the 10-point plan for the Reconstruction movement, the authors included repeal of the so-called free trade agreements, because we understand that the movement of people is happening because of economic forces and laws that are passed by our representatives that force this kind of movement. Secondly, we also have to have a cultural component. A movement can't be built without culture. And so that's why it's important for us to have Head Rock here, you know, what do they call it? Spitting the words. Because we have to have the culture. And we would like to take our message into the spoken word joints across our country. We've visited quite a few of them already. And I've been accused of partying through this campaign, but I'm not just partying, I'm communing with my constituents. And at the same time, we also have to understand, because of the work that we were able to do on counterintelligence program while I was in the Congress with the wonderful organizational skills of John Judge, where we held the only open congressional briefing on the tragic events of September 11th, where we brought in lawyers, scholars, national security whistleblowers, academicians to investigate 9/11 truth on the Hill, where we still need some more truth. But the bottom line is that we also have got to understand sacrifice without expectation of reward, service without expectation of reward. And that's one of the things that I've learned, that we have to go through this business of movement building without any expectation of any reward other than the success of the movement and what it can bring to people all across our country and people all over the world. So I will say thank you very much for your questions. Thank you very much for coming here. And I'd like to bring up Dr. Jared Ball.
Good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Now, I'm just going to take a couple seconds. I really wasn't planning on saying anything, and I was actually looking to get a break from the classroom and the campaigning to just listen, but never, right? Just a couple of things. I noticed, you know, the rock star appeal of Obama on this campus. I saw what happened here not too long ago, and with no disrespect to our candidate, I see a stark difference. But I think we have to understand why that is occurring and feel heartened in our own involvement in supporting a sister running a campaign such as this. And understand something I was thinking about just even this morning, and I actually think about it all the time. When Marshall McLuhan, the media scholar, not someone I always agreed with or even understood entirely all the time, but he said that we don't know who discovered water, we just know it was not the fish. An all-pervasive environment is undetectable. And I think that speaks to why, when Sister Cynthia is talking about there is this feeling in this country and around the world that we need change, that it may not know necessarily where to go, which is why it's channeled safely and comfortably into safe spaces, safe meaning safe and acceptable by those in power, into the two major candidates in the Democratic Party, and people are debating whether or not we should have this that this is the change that we need. We have a woman or a black person. We have both embodied in our candidate, by the way. And so as I was coming here and noticing that a lot of the traffic on campus was unfortunately not for this event, and recognizing what even my brother-in-law who attends this university, who was so excited about Obama and was so excited about the electricity on this campus, and how he snuck in, not to snitch on him, but how he had to sneak in because he avoided the line that stretched all the way down to the M to get in to see Obama. And then I asked him, what was it specifically? And he had no answer. He said it felt good. It was his responses were vague. It felt good. It sounded good. He even told me, he told my wife that he said Obama sounded like me. And I said, well, that's clearly because you're not paying attention. And I said, that's proof. That's proof of exactly what I'm talking about, what McLuhan was trying to get us to understand. That we don't know what is creating this excitement or this fervor. We don't know what's creating this environment around us. We just know that it is our environment, and something about it makes us feel good, and we'll go ahead and feel safe and cast our votes over here. And I just want to say, and I really am not going to take any more time, I just want to say that the questions about everything that Sister Cynthia was talking about here today, and I just want to reiterate what she was describing. These were all sanctioned. All these horrific conditions were sanctioned, monitored, overseen, and accepted by the two major parties, including the two major candidates of the Democratic Party. So what we are trying to isolate and highlight with these campaigns, with our support of Sister Cynthia, is that the structure itself has comfortably and historically and repetitively provided us with their acceptable choices. So even when we talk about media and we work with young people, we always say, we walk into a room and I say, if you can think of the number I'm thinking of, if you can guess the number I'm thinking of between 1 and 10, I will give you $100. And then they guess, 1, 2, and they fractions and decimals, and they get to a fevered pitch, and they get frustrated, and I keep saying, no, no, no. And then I say the answer is, 720, 8,010. And they say, well, you didn't tell us that. You said think between 1 and 10. And I said, exactly. It assures that all of your energy and your excitement and your interest in getting that money will be focused on a narrowly selected by me range of options, so that no matter what you select in your appearance and in your feelings of being involved in independent free will decision making, none of your decisions will affect me. And since I never have that $100, I can say I never have to worry about having to give it up. And that's what we're seeing on the electoral political realm as well. So all that we are trying to suggest is that the movements that the brother was asking about, the struggle, the revolution, the ideas, this feeling around the world, in fact, of a need for change can only occur if we go outside the accepted ranges that have been provided by the most dominant elite. And if you see the Pew study that just came out about 2 months ago, it showed that Barack and Hillary are getting more elite corporate funding than even the Republicans were at that time, when they had their full run of candidates. And what that should tell you, without any further explanation or analysis, thank you, is that when we do capital resistance, we're used to, talking over the beats. Yeah, well, me too, me too. What that is saying, of course, is that all those funders have no worries. They have no feelings of threat. They have no fear in giving this support to these candidates because no real change can occur. And this is not a personal attack on anyone. It is about the structures themselves. Sister Cynthia knows better than anybody working within the Democratic Party of all the effort and work that she put in. When I first encountered her personally was when she had put on in 2002 the panel on the assassination of Dr. King. And it's at the Congressional Black Caucus event. And you walk around this event and all the black congressional people are there and they're all over the place. And you walk around, and I went into this room and that room, and I would go into this room and it was, all around the walls, AT&T, Sprint, Viacom, Verizon, whoever. Then I go into Sister Cynthia's room and there's a panel of people talking about why did they kill King, who killed King, and how does that impact us today? And I said, oh, Lord have mercy. Sat down on the floor with my camera, and that's why I have 4 hours of documented footage to this day, all crooked, me sitting like this, documenting this event to make the point in the classroom or wherever else that I go that this is what politics should look like for those of us looking for change. These are the questions that need to be raised. And when I stood in Bobby Rush's room with all those telecom numbers, it became clear to me. And I remember thinking, I asked a friend of mine that I was there with, I said, Bobby Rush was Fred Hampton's boy. Fred Hampton assassinated in 1969. Black Panther Party leader in Chicago, Illinois, assassinated by the FBI and the Chicago Police Department. And I'm standing there thinking, is this what your boy was killed for? Is this what he was assassinated for? Is this what he gave up his life for, so that you could stand here and revel in your blackness and your congressional representative position and take Viacom or Verizon or whoever else's money and talk about nothing? All right, so anyway, so I'll just conclude by saying what we always talked about. When George Jackson talked about a revolution, he said we need 3 things, one of which was an underground press, which is what we always work with when we're doing free mix or WPFW, and we need an aggressive electoral political party that will popularize revolutionary culture. And that's what we have an opportunity to help build through Sister Cynthia's campaign. So if you want to help build this movement, if you want to help build this change, you have to understand that electoral politics are representations of social movements and power that is beyond the candidate that you're looking at. So if you are considering Obama or anyone else, and to the brother who asked earlier about what Obama, I'll say, look at the NAACP report that just came out that highlights where Obama is on issues of structural racial inequality, on police brutality. See that he has no statements, he has no concern for these core issues facing not just black people, but a lot of people in this country, Latinos, poor folks, the indigenous, all these people are facing these problems. He has nothing to say about that. So when he's saying change, you have to ask yourself, do I really know what he's talking about? And more than that, can the structure that he is working within allow him to bring about that kind of change? And we're arguing that he cannot, it's not personal, cannot. We saw that with Sister Cynthia doing that work, but then the Democratic Party, the structure itself choked out her political strength, choked out the strength that we were giving her as communities in support of her. So we must now do it again within the structure of an alternative party that is really only an alternative when you put it in relationship to the 2 dominant parties positioned in front of us by those in power so that they don't have to worry about what we do. Just go vote. Get excited and go vote. More youth people, young people are coming out to vote. So what if that vote is being carefully corralled into a safe space? So we need to get that energy redirected into building something that Sister Cynthia is representing, and that's why we're supporting her, and we encourage you to do the same. And thank you, Sister, and thank you all for coming out. Thank you.